Hey gang, Craig Ripley here. Welcome to another episode of Living Off the Slab. As you see from the title of this video, it's time to talk about what I think is a very important topic, and that is the kind of clothing that you're going to select for a motorcycle tour. Now, if you've been watching my channel for any length of time, you know that I did this topic about 3 years ago, back when I had that big Santa Claus beard. And I covered the things that I typically wore while I'm going on one of my tours. But back then, I have to say, I was riding primarily a big cruising bike, and I've also learned a few things over the years. Now, I was also asked by one of my viewers to cover this topic, but focus on new riders, in particularly the things that I've learned over the years that might be beneficial for a new rider to know right away. So I thought that that was a great idea. I decided then to incorporate that into this discussion on motorcycle touring clothing. For those of you who are coming into this video as an introduction to my channel, let me give you just a little bit of background. Right now, in fact, in about 5 weeks from now, I'm going to be getting on a bike, and myself and a couple of buddies are going to be riding up to Alaska and then all the way back here to the Boston area in New England. So we are getting ready for that trip, and I'm going through all of the preparation, all of the things that we're learning, the new things, the old things, everything that's going into getting prepared for this Alaska trip. Now, of course, this topic, motorcycle clothing, can become a very lengthy one. There's all kinds of categories we need to talk about, and there can get some real detail and actually some controversy on the kind of clothing that people want to choose for a trip. So I'm going to break this up into several smaller videos, because we all know I have a tendency to kind of drone on, so I don't want this to end up being a 45-minute or an hour-long video. So I'm going to break it up into smaller segments for each type of motorcycle clothing that we're going to talk about. So here are the topics that we're going to cover in this little mini-series. Right, and these are how I think about it, putting all of my clothing together when I'm going out on the road. First thing, I look at my gear. That is my helmets, my jackets, all the things that I'm going to be wearing for protection while I'm riding. Number two, I am a really big base layer guy, so I then start thinking about the base layers that I'm going to bring. Number three would then be my mid layers. Am I going to need any additional protection for temperature, right? And primarily, we're heading up to Alaska, and it is going to be July, so I'm not expecting really cold temperatures, but we might hit some mornings where it might be in the 40s. All right, so I'm going to want to bring some mid layers to keep me warm if we do run into that kind of situation. So after mid layers, then I only have one more category of clothing, and that is my casual clothing, or what I'm going to wear off of the bike. One of the biggest decisions that you're going to have to make when you start packing your clothing is how much should you bring. Right? I know when I went out on my first trip, it was a 3-week trip, and so I ended up packing about 10 days worth of clothing. Way too much. I had 2 full bags of clothing, most of it that I never even used. All right, so that's the first thing you got to do, is really decide that you don't need to bring that much clothing. So to get over this need or this desire to bring all kinds of clothing, you have to realize that any length trip is just a series of smaller trips, right? Something in the neighborhood of 3 to 5 days in length. Now, while we're on this topic, let me give a little shout out to one of my fellow YouTubers out there, and that is Mario Orsini, or you probably know him as Two-Wheeled Rider. He's got a video channel out there that you should take a look at, and he's actually written a nice little book called The Motorcyclist's Guide to Travel. It's available on Amazon. That's where I picked this up. And he's done a really good job of breaking down all of the different aspects of getting ready for a motorcycle tour, and again, making it really simple. And I think if you're a new rider, this is something you should probably really take a look at. Of course, along with watching all these great videos. In his book, Mario talks about the rule of 5, and that is any length trip, 5 days or longer, you want to view as a series of smaller trips that are about 5 days in length, right? That way, you stop on the road, you take your clothes, you wash them, and then you have fresh clothes for the next set of 5 days. Right? And that's a typical pattern that you'll find motorcycle tourists using. Some will use a lesser number of days. I know, for example, me, what I will do is use 4 days. I have one set of clothes that I wear when I leave for the trip, and I have 3 additional days. So every 4th day, I am them stopping, we're going to wash our clothes, and so we can continue on, again, with fresh clothing. Before I go on here, I want to address something because I know I'm going to hear about it in the comments. And there are folks out there that like to keep things even more simple than just carrying 3 to 5 days worth of clothing. Some will only carry, for example, 1 pair of underwear. Again, not my thing, but I know that there are people who do that. And every night when they're in a hotel room, they stop, they wash out their underwear, they hang it to dry so that it's ready to go the next day. Keeps everything nice and light. Again, that's an option if that's really what you want to do. But for all you new riders out there, again, just know that it's a personal thing, that there isn't any one way that is right as long as it works for you. All right, so while I'm talking to the new riders, let me continue on for a couple of other topics directed specifically to you. And the first one is about that individuality that I talked about. Right, we all know that riding a motorcycle is as much about style and about how you present your persona as it is about riding the motorcycle. Right? I mean, it just is the truth. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's just the way it is. Especially if you're into the cruiser genre or maybe the cafe racer genre, there's a lot of style concerns that you have to address. Again, nothing wrong with it, just the way that it is. Now, with that said, let me pass on a little bit of advice for you. Like, I went through that phase as well, where, I had to wear the right leather jacket, with the right kind of logos and all of that kind of stuff on it. And I still like that stuff. I mean, it's still part of having fun while motorcycling. But when I go out on a tour, I kind of throw all that stuff out the window. What I'm concerned about is not how I look, but is whether my gear is performing the job that it needs to do. Right? I'm going to pick a jacket not because of what it looks like. I'm going to pick it because it keeps me dry, it keeps me comfortable, it protects me if I happen to go down. I'm going to pick a helmet for the same reasons. I'm going to pick my pants and my shoes and all those things for those reasons, and not because I'm trying to keep up with the latest style or what people think that a rider should look like. All right, so again, that's just my 2 cents. Obviously, you do what you want. All right, gang, that's all for this video. Hopefully that was short and sweet. Next time, we'll dive in to one of these individual categories of motorcycle clothing.